All right, so I want to show this video because it was produced by a highly experienced aviation professional, a person called, well, his name is Juan Brown, but his YouTube channel is called Blanco Lirio. It's something I've been following for a long time. And he spoke yesterday, today is December 30th, 2022. He spoke yesterday about Southwest Airlines meltdown. So just a quick little bit about him before we go into the video. Like I said, he's a highly trained pilot, diverse types of aircraft and professional institutions. He's trained as a fighter pilot, and he does a lot of accident investigation, especially with general aviation, but also with commercial aircraft. He's still an active pilot. He flies internationally routinely for one of the major airlines. But anyway, let's get into the Southwest Airlines. Like he said, the largest airline meltdown in aviation history. And the funny thing is, well, the sad thing is, it basically had occurred already once. I think it was 2021 when Southwest had the same thing happen, but it just didn't, it was more weather related and less of a meltdown. But it did tie back to their IT systems, which are antiquated. I think everybody knows that by now. It's been in the news. 40-year-old system. My thoughts about that coming up here shortly, but let's hear what he has to say.
It's Thursday, the 29th of December. My name's Juan Brown. You're watching the Blanco Lirio channel. And on my recent trip to Sydney, Australia, I had no idea the extent of the meltdown at Southwest Airlines until we returned back here to Sacramento Airport and saw the number of Southwest 737s parked all over the ramp and all over Terminal B at Sacramento's International Airport.
So that's telling because he would know. Like, I'm sure he saw that coming in and landing. He saw these Southwest jets and he knew something was wrong. So, but that he, due to the fact that he was flying internationally, probably wasn't paying attention to what was going on in the United States at the time.
Here's the update on how this historic meltdown occurred. The single largest meltdown in corporate airline aviation history is a train wreck that has been long in coming, but we never understood exactly what was the fundamental cause of the problems at Southwest Airlines until this meltdown recently.
I agree with that, except that the general public did not understand. However, I'm certain that executive leadership at Southwest Airlines was fully aware of what could have happened, and he goes into more detail about that later.
Remember back in October of 21, there was the meltdown at Southwest Airlines, and it was blamed on weather in Florida and a ATC slowdown. We never got to the root cause of really why these problems were occurring at Southwest Airlines. And the reason is because Southwest Airlines has a very draconian and very effective social media policy and watch group at the airlines. If an employee at Southwest Airlines is caught on social media making a derogatory comment about the airlines, they are terminated or threatened with termination.
So that's huge right there. I want to play that again because that's the truth.
Policy and watch group at the airlines. If an employee at Southwest Airlines is caught on social media making a derogatory comment about the airlines, they are terminated or threatened with termination.
That's huge. Imagine having that underneath you or around you at all times as a Southwest Airlines employee. You're not allowed to make any disparaging comments about your employer whatsoever at any time for any reason, or you risk becoming terminated from the company, possibly sued, who knows. So that's the atmosphere at that company, which is telling.
So as a result, we never got to the bottom of the story as to why they were having these problems. And
exactly, because they were not allowed to socialize it, and because executive leadership at the company kept it quiet. So that's how they kept their problems internal, and nobody knew about them until now.
Of course, now we know it's a fundamental lack of investment in information technology that has caused this.
Absolutely correct. And my theory is that their antiquated 40-year-old scheduling system that they never upgraded, the reason that they never upgraded it is because, in part, they're a budget airline, and they probably took a look at the price tag of what it would take to upgrade and the pain and the cost, and they said, no way, we're not doing that. We're going to risk it, and we're going to keep going. So, maybe it would cost $300 million to upgrade that system. I don't know how much it would cost, but probably a lot. While I'm guessing a lot of the other major non-budget airlines did upgrade their systems, Southwest did not.
Thinking about going solar,
Let's skip this
but
ad.
not sure whether it's worth it for your home? Well, before you get...
But it was an incident at Denver's airport back on from the 21st of December through about the 24th of December that started this meltdown before the IT failed. As we all know, Southwest Airlines is a point-to-point airline system, but it does operate through other airlines' major hubs. And over here at the major hub of Denver, Colorado, as this bomb cyclone storm began to hit on or about the 21st of December, an operational emergency was declared by management there, specifically regarding the ramp agents. As the temperatures plunged and ramp agents were, of course, have to work outside with the aircraft, were having a more and more difficult time of dealing with the aircraft in these freezing temperatures, a strongly worded memo went out from management to the ramp agents declaring that there was too many people calling in sick and that they were going to have to declare an emergency. And
that's huge right there. Think about that. You're a ramp agent. You know this weather is coming in, and you call in sick because you don't want to be outside when it's 0 degrees and -30 wind chill and the snow's blowing, and you don't want to be working. So you call in sick, which isn't right. I completely agree. That's not right. But Southwest said, don't you dare. And their management sent that sternly worded email, which I'm sure is made public somewhere. I haven't looked for it. I haven't read it. I'm sure it's out there. But they said, don't you dare. And if you do try to show up, call in sick that day, you need to provide a doctor's note. Because my theory is that management was fully aware that if this would start the cycle of the same thing that happened back in 21, they know how fragile their system is, and this will just start a cascade effect into the holidays, which could possibly ruin the company. So he has more to say about that. Let's hear it.
And if anybody is sick, they're going to have a letter from their doctor the day that they return to work. Everybody is going to have to work mandatory overtime, and anybody that is calling in sick that does not have a doctor's letter by the time that they show back up for work, they will be terminated.
So that's huge. And I don't know if ramp agent jobs are union or not, but mandatory overtime, that's unfortunately common in some industries. I would certainly not want to be subjected to mandatory overtime, but sometimes you do. And I don't know the rules surrounding that, but these employees probably knew that was a possibility, and they didn't want to do it, I'm guessing, in some cases. So what did they do? They quit. And good on them for quitting. That was pretty brave. You quit your job on the spot after you get that sternly worded email, the don't you dare email coming from Southwest Airlines management, and they quit. I'm pretty sure they didn't have another job lined up. They just said, to heck with this, I'm out of here. And that's pretty brave. And I think some 200 people did that. And that started this all. He describes that here.
As this word got around to the ramp agents at Denver, apparently this has not been verified.
So that's important. This has not been verified. It's apparent, but has not been verified. So little disclaimer there.
Upwards of 200 ramp agents quit.
So how do you verify something like that? Well, it's pretty difficult unless a journalist or someone, a reputable journalist, reaches out to some of these people to verify that they are no longer employed by the company. Perhaps they reach out to Southwest Airlines to verify that. So it's pretty much anecdotal evidence at this time, but I believe it. I could definitely see it happening.
And these are jobs that pay about $20 to $28 per hour, working with the aircraft out in the weather.
So imagine that, you could probably make $20 an hour fairly easily at that hourly wage working indoors, any number of places. And here you are forced by your employer, mandatory overtime, and to be outdoors working this job, which that was a condition of employment. You knew that this could happen, and you knew that you could have this mandatory overtime. You knew the weather could be terrible, and you are trying to call in sick to keep your job. And then when it gets warmer, you're going to return to your job, and the employer is saying, no, you need to provide a doctor's note, or else if you don't, you're terminated. So I get the circumstances, but for them to quit, like I said, is pretty brave.
Once that hit Denver, the aircraft began to stack up, getting parked. They couldn't get the aircraft into the gates. When you cannot get the aircraft into the gates, especially in this kind of weather, you have to start canceling flights. So that started a rolling cancellation of flights.
There it is right there. You can't get into the gates because you don't have gate agents to serve these arriving aircraft. And when you have them stacking up like that, you have to cancel flights because you can't land there. That's what began this whole thing.
From Denver, Colorado. Soon those cancellations of flights ended up shutting down the entire Southwest operation, first at Denver, and that was followed by Dallas, St. Louis, Nashville, and Chicago's Midway Airport. The entire Southwest operation was shut down.
That's huge.
Now, with this many aircraft being parked, this is when the IT problems began with the SkySolver software that Southwest Airlines uses. This software is circa 1990s vintage 40-year-old software that they use to schedule pilots, flight attendants, crews, and marry them up with the aircraft and form the scheduling sequence. This 1990s software is capable of handling upwards of about 300 changes. We're talking changes in the thousands now.
Now, he doesn't describe 300 changes per what? Per hour, per minute, per day? I'm guessing, I don't know. He didn't describe that, but basically the system was overwhelmed. It could not handle the changes when the changes are in the thousands and it can only handle it in the hundreds. So it's an order of magnitude of change that this system, this antiquated IT system, could not handle. And this system is required because it marries the the pilots, the flight attendants, and the crew with a plane. So if you can't do that, you can't fly.
Now, and the software was simply overwhelmed, and so all the automation for scheduling apparently failed, forcing schedulers to revert to manual scheduling, an extremely complicated job.
So that's the big problem there, and that's why everything took so long, is because they went back to leather-bound booklets to figure everything out, and everything took for so long. It took so long to set that stuff up that the flight departure time has come and gone, and you're still not even ready because you've exceeded that departure time. So that was the issue there. So computer systems completely failed. You're going to the paper method. It's a very complicated method. People are probably not well trained in that, so they need to go slowly because they need to make sure they don't make any mistakes, and that's what caused it. All the while, Southwest made no mention of this to the general public at all.
Completely overwhelming the system, thus forcing the airline to do a complete reset, shut down basically the entire airline, get everything regrouped, and then reopen and start all over. And it looks like, the good news is, it looks like tomorrow, Friday, the 30th of December, they will begin to start flying what appears to me to be a fairly full schedule as of.
Now that's interesting too, because they shut down everything, they reset everything, and now here we are on Friday. Today is that day, and they apparently are back on track. That doesn't mean much to the people that the Christmas holiday is already over. So they're apparently trying to service the New Year's travelers and still continue to service the Christmas travelers that are trying to come home from their Christmas break at wherever they were. So these people have been extended by 4 or 5 days unplanned. had to get hotels, food, uh, ground transportation for their entire families, $1,500. I don't know. Who knows how much it costs? There's stories going around of who's going to pay for that. If will Southwest pay for that? I don't know if that's clear yet. Let alone the fact of just the disruption in travel. All sorts of events missed, and what about travel vouchers for the fact that their flights got messed up so badly? So Southwest has a lot to deal with here.
As of the time of this recording. As one of the many results of the Colgan air disaster years ago, the federal government got involved with the FAA.
So if you don't know about the Colgan air disaster, look that up. It's Colgan. I think it was a code share airline. The aircraft crashed, and I think if I recall correctly, it was due to fatigue. I think the co-pilot was fatigued, and I don't remember the circumstances around that, but Colgan, Colgan. So the FAA made these changes, and what he's showing here might be a copy of one of his flight rules as a pilot, where he's looking at his printout of what's remaining, what's available, what is accumulated, what his limits are for the different flight rules, like 117.11. The limit is 17. He's accumulated nothing. He has available of 17. Flight time 14.38, remaining 2.22, that kind of thing. So he's explaining how this is complicated, and the fact that now that you're on paper, you have to take your papers that look like this and calculate, do I even have a pilot that can legally fly this planned flight? So you have all these people at Southwest trying to figure this out and trying to do it very quickly. And if they get it wrong, I believe they would face hefty fines from the FAA. So that's the circumstances.
And rewrote the FARs, the Federal Aviation Regulations, regarding crew rest for pilots. In so doing, they made it more efficient for the airlines to, in what was an effort to try to combat fatigue amongst pilots, the government actually created a system that allows the airlines to use us more efficiently. But it also greatly complicated the scheduling requirements for our flights. There are now 6 different FAR regulations that each and every individual pilot and flight have to meet in order to be legal for that flight. It takes incredible IT power, computing power to keep track of this down to the minute or the 10th of a minute to make.
So this, I've got a little bit of a bone to pick here because it doesn't take incredible computing power. It just takes, it can be complicated, but it can be sorted out. Modern computing can handle this without issue, but it is complicated. I agree. He has 6 rules he has to adhere to as a pilot in order to ascertain whether or not he can fly legally at any particular point in time commercially. So, but the computing power is there. It's just, but when you don't have that and you're trying to do that on paper, it is incredibly difficult. I can see that.
Make sure that you are legal. So you need to take all these 5 different rules, look at their limits, their legal limits, compare that to the actual flight on that actual day to see if you are in fact legal to fly that trip on that day. That takes a lot of computing power and is virtually impossible to do by hand, manually. Yes. The easiest way to do it is if you just park everything for 3 or 4 days. That resets all these numbers, and now you can marry up nearly anybody to any aircraft and begin.
That's the incredible part about it. The way they tried to solve this, and apparently they did, if they execute on this now, because today is Friday the 30th, when you park everything, all these numbers return to 0 because nobody's flying, nobody's doing anything. So now you've got a blank slate. So that's your reset. You start over. Your computer systems are no longer overwhelmed because you're starting at all zeros for all pilots, all aircraft, all crew. So that's what they did. Did Southwest Airlines socialize this? No, absolutely they didn't. Is that what the gate agents were telling the passengers? Absolutely they weren't. Hats off to these gate agents that had to struggle with these passengers, some of them unruly, some of them making demands that were ridiculous and being incredibly frustrated and angry, which I can understand. but these gate agents really taking it on the chin for the company on behalf of management. It's pretty incredible.
Begin to fly the schedule.
The war in Ukraine forced my family to flee.
Another ad.
My sister, mother, and grandmother left their entire.
Compounding the problem for Southwest passengers is Southwest Airlines has no interline agreement with other airlines. Typically with the major airlines, the other major airlines, once you have a flight cancellation, that airline can coordinate with other airlines within the interline agreement to get you rebooked on a completely different airline to get.
That's huge. No interline agreements with Southwest. Southwest is a budget carrier, but they're a major airline, and they do not have interline agreements. Do you think that's made clear to passengers? Do you think Southwest, when they're trying to sell you a fare, that they say, hey, by the way, if we have to cancel this thing, you're on your own. We're not going to try to get you booked on Delta to get over to wherever you're trying to go. You're on your own because we don't have interline agreements. Go ahead and purchase this flight. No, that's not how it works. You got to read the fine print. You got to understand that. But that's the risk you take when you fly a budget airline.
Get you to your destination. Southwest Airlines does not have that capability. In other words, you're on your own. The same problem with hotels. Once the system is broken down this bad, the airline can no longer has the manpower resource to get people into hotels. You're on your own for booking your own hotels, and this is extended to the crews as well. Typically the company gets you the hotel and you go into crew rest, but they were unable to even accommodate their own crews. This turns into a very abusive situation for the flight crews, flight attendants, and pilots. Of course, they can just go get their own hotel, same as the passengers. You're just going to have to go get your own hotel and hope for a reimbursement after the dust settles.
That's incredible. Not only could they not service the passengers to say, we'll help you get this hotel, we'll help you get ground transportation to the hotel, take this shuttle, that kind of thing. They said, can't do it. They're telling their own employees, we can't do any of that for you because we're so overwhelmed right now. You're on your own. So everybody's fighting for hotels and rental cars and everything like that in this weather. Everything's overbooked, I'm sure, and that had to have been a nightmare alone. Now, what's coming up here about what happened in Nashville is really incredible.
But eventually, this gets to be an abusive situation for the agents, the gate agents inside the airport, to where passengers just begin unloading on them. In many cases, unnecessarily so, as the situation is beyond their control. And it got so bad at Nashville's airport that the police showed up and declared that once you no longer have a ticket to fly on an airline and you're inside the terminal, you are deemed a trespasser.
That's incredible. I bet most people didn't, maybe they knew it in the back of their head, but they never really thought about it. If you get to the airport, you're all checked in, you get to the gate, and your flight is canceled, you are no longer a ticketed passenger. Therefore, you do not have a right to be in the airline. You are now, or in the airport, you are now trespassing. You can be arrested for trespassing. I imagine this is how they kept everybody from sleeping on the floors, because they knew nobody could get in the hotels. They're all booked. You couldn't even get a rental car to the place or a shuttle. Everything is booked up. So if you're the last remaining people, you could be arrested for trespassing. There's the police telling you that if you try to sit there and stay at the airport overnight because you've got nowhere to go. What an incredible situation.
And thus have to vacate the terminal or be charged with trespassing.
So you have to leave, or you could be charged. Now, I imagine they didn't charge anybody, but I don't know. But that's the threat you face, a trespassing charge for just being at the airport trying to get on your flight.
As we all know, watching this channel, it takes a series of events or a chain of events before a major mishap happens. Some of the holes in the Swiss cheese that led up to this incident with Southwest Airlines go all the way back to the beginning of Southwest Airlines, founded by Herb Kelleher, a very hands-on, operations-oriented CEO that fostered the fact that it is the people of the company that are the most important asset to the company. And that's still true to this day. they still have the greatest people working over at Southwest Airlines. But since Herb has moved on, subsequent CEOs have been less operationally oriented and more financially oriented. And this sounds a lot like what's happened over at Boeing Aircraft. And as a result, these financially oriented guys, well, they've managed to stave off bankruptcy, which is something all the major airlines have gone through, and provide good stock growth. However, in the process of saving all this money, they've failed to invest in upgrading their 1990s SkySolver software IT program.
And when he says failed to invest, the failure is not because it was impossible. The failure is because management decided not to. It's that simple. And I truly believe they looked at the cost of it and said, no, I don't want to pay that much. We're going to risk it. We're going to keep going with this old software. Well, they're not anymore, that's for sure. There's no way that they could continue with this software based on what just happened.
Now, the current CEO knows this has been a problem and is now going to be absolutely forced to do something about it. Southwest Airlines is a great company operated by great people and is a very important part of the U.S. economy. And hopefully now the bean counters up in management will make the proper investment in information technology to allow this company to operate smoothly for all of its employees and passengers and customers.
So that's it. I think that was summarized pretty well. It is a great company full of a lot of great people, and it's like you said, the bean counters are the problem. That's where this whole problem came from, and those people know who they are. I don't know who they are, but they know who they are, and they're the root of this problem, and they should be held to account. I mean, heads should roll for this. There's no question about it. But even that's not enough for some of the damage that they did, in my opinion. But anyway, I just wanted to share that because Blanco Lirio, aka Juan Brown, that's his legal name, highly respected aviation professional, speaking to the Southwest Meltdown, and I thought that was pretty interesting. And thanks for watching.